Christ do I enjoy multiplayer-only games and being around other human beings in general. Syncing up schedules, employing basic social skills, smelling each other's armpits, having to wear trousers, oh, it's just the fucking best. And boy do I appreciate the output of Josef Fares and Hazelight Studios, consisting entirely of narrative games that are strictly and unmovably two-player only. Just as much as I appreciate wedding DJs trying to convince me that I really secretly want to humiliate myself on the dance floor. First they did A Way Out, which certainly made me look for a way out of having to play this fucking awful game. Then, in perhaps the sharpest my opinion on a studio has ever U-turned between games, they did It Takes Two, as in it takes 2 tabs of blotter acid to make something as fun and creative as this. Now let's hope I won't be split on this fiction or whatever. While I hate having to go to the basement to reactivate the homunculus, I respect the strict two-player thing. At least it knows what it wants to be and can be optimized for its unique dynamic. Better than shit like Helldivers going, no really, you can totally play this single player and it'll be just as good, while smiling insincerely and making uncomfortable glances at my shillelagh. Split fiction is much as one should expect from a follow-up to It Takes Two. At its core, it's a perfectly competently made 3D platformer, and every section introduces a new interesting brace of puzzle-stroke combat mechanics that pay off the two-player dynamic. One player gets a climb ability, the other gets a glide ability. One gets magnetism, the other gets repulsion. One holds a big piece of toast, the other can manipulate Vegemite, etc. It's fun to get through the challenges, the homunculus seemed happy to be involved, and no one idea hangs around long enough to get boring. I wouldn't say it reaches the heights of creativity It Takes Two managed, there's no wing-walking squirrel fights or stuffed elephant torture, but if you're looking for a fun platformer to enjoy with your personal homunculus, then I recommend it. Right, that's what I wanted to get out of the way first. I will now spend the rest of my time complaining about the plot. Because all I remembered about It Takes Two was that it was fun. I nodded along with everyone else when it won Game of the Year, and I slightly resent Split Fiction for reminding me that the writing in Hazelight's games has always been kinda shit. The premise is we play as Zoe and Mia, 2 young adult fiction writers with nothing in common except how easy they find it to enter their names on high score tables, who are invited to a tech demo by a sinister corporation ostensibly to have their stories published as immersive VR experiences, but it turns out the VR machine's actual purpose is to suck all the creativity juice out of their heads to be used for evil and evil profit, in a slightly clumsy analogy for AI copyright disputes. But something goes wrong and Zoe and Mia end up stuck in the same machine together, having to live out each other's stories, which will somehow destroy the machine and show that the power of wealthy tech bros will always be defeated by the power of solidarity, friendship, and young adult fiction. There are so many fundamental flaws in the central premise, I'm not sure where to start. Suffice to say, the heroes hardly need to destroy the machine, because after the company tries to publish all the stories they've nicked, they're going to get sued to oblivion anyway by about 9,000 different copyright holders. My homunculus and I lost count of all the other video games briefly referenced by the constantly changing mechanics: Prince of Persia, Zelda, Gradia, Space Harrier, Panzer Dragoon, Metroid, and I don't know why this is all presented as stories the protagonists have written. They must have been really bloody boring to read. And then they shot an enemy, and then they shot another enemy, and then they shot a third enemy, and then they slid down a hill on their bums for the 19th fucking time. It might have made more sense if the protagonists were indie game designers, although a story about naive young indie devs being held down and milked for all their good ideas by a soulless corporate machine might have hit a bit close to home for a game published by EA. But okay, it's a silly premise. So what? It's a fun, facetious game. Not everything has to be Sophie's fucking choice. The thing is, it's a plot about on the level of a subpar young adult novel, primarily about subpar young adult novel writers and how they're the most creative and interesting people in the world. And it does something I find very irksome in games, and that's using dialogue between its characters to give itself compliments. Wow, what an impressive view, they might say. I hope the art team that put it together negotiate a higher salary after this. Or, what? We have to ride on the back of a dragon? How did you come up with something that creative, you insane, twisted fucking genius? I said in my Alan Wake 2 video that any creative work about the power of creativity is going to be inherently up itself, but you don't need to sledgehammer it home. I hate whenever a work of fiction ends with the protagonist writing a really successful book about it with the same name as the work of fiction. The fucking Game of Thrones finale did that, and if you can only take one piece of advice for all your future endeavours, let it be to never do anything that the Game of Thrones finale did. But the stringiest worms-riddled dog turd running through the centre of this apple turnover for me was the characters. Ooh, they're chalk and cheese they are. One's a city girl, one's a country girl, one's dad is a mechanic, the other's dad is a sheep. The game will tell you that country girl is optimistic and extroverted, but she comes across more as a smug, flaky busybody. And city girl is pessimistic and introverted, but she comes across more as an unlikable, spiky asshole. The central wedge between them is that one only writes hackneyed sci-fi and the other only writes hackneyed fantasy. And they spend the whole fucking game being judgy of each other for it. I wish there'd been a third lead who was like a literary fiction writer who could point out that every fucking bookshop in the world groups those two genres together for a reason, and they're both equally frivolous twats. The dialogue's also overwritten, with frivolous twat A and B feeling the need to comment on fucking everything, constantly telling without showing, and describing their personalities at each other. You know what though, I don't think I'd change it, because in the end, part of the fun of the game, and indeed of composing this nasty review, lay in me taking the piss out of the characters throughout every dialogue scene, and the mandatory second player meant I always had someone to riff with. And if that was the intended experience, then Josef Fares is a fucking evil genius, but I doubt it. In brief, you're a great game designer, Josef. Now for fuck's sake, get someone else to write the story for your next one. Hit me up, I'm a published author. That's why I found it slightly offensive the way Split Fiction pushes the lazy notion that people only ever write about adversity or horror because of unresolved personal trauma. You don't need to be fucked in the head to write fucked up things. We're not all Neil bloody Gaiman. I had an upsetting thought the other day. All those thousands of zero punctuation videos I made for The Escapist, they're all still up on YouTube and are presumably still generating revenue. But for whom? Certainly not me, the person who spent over 10 years of their life pouring their heart into them. No, I have to do things like come on here and say, if you enjoy my content and want to ensure it keeps coming, please do consider subscribing to the Second Wind Patreon. It really will make a huge difference, and it's what keeps us going. You'll get extra access, all my fun Patreon-only bonus videos, and we've just moved ad-free videos to the $5 a month tier. Surely $5 is a small price to pay to alleviate guilt. Well, guilt for freeloading off me, at least, not all of it. You should still feel guilty if you've, murdered someone. You have to go up to the $50 tier to make up for that.